Hello, John. Thank you for coming back to the channel. This is episode 19, and we're recording this on August 25th. Last night, as you know, Israel did a strike on Hezbollah. The last we talked, there was an incursion in Kursk. There's the nuclear issue with Ukraine and Russia. I don't know where and then obviously what's been going on in the US politics with
Yes,
RFK Jr.
yes.
I don't know where you want to take this.
Well,
But
let's go ahead.
before we do that, we got to remind the audience, make sure to click the link. There's a link in the description of this video that will take you to John's website, and you'll be able to sign up for his periodical and also sign up for a reading. That way you can help support his work and you get to be abreast on current events and learn a little bit about your future. So thank you again, John, for coming to the channel. And where do you
Thanks
want
for
to
having
start?
me. Well, yeah, it is a lot of, let's start with the convention. Let's start with the the rather surprising. I don't know if this happened when we did the last show, but it was around the time that, I mean, that's the first time I've ever seen a palace coup, uh, basically forcing the elected, well, there's dispute about whether he was elected fairly, but the elected president, no less, who was at the end of the primaries when some people did vote for him, but I mean, what we got now is and he was not happy. I mean, I watched him in they had him on Monday night, the president of the United States on Monday night, as far away from the final speech, as far away of all the shining, here's the shiny new lady, and she's so joyful and all of that. And she's also in American history, somebody who's reached to being nominated as the candidate, Kamala Harris or Kamala Harris. You know, sometimes she also calls herself Kamala. When there was that big stink a few years back when I'm Kamala, and she made a big stink about it. Next day, I think it was in the election, she comes up and says, "Hi, I'm Kamala." You know, so you know, um, so so we had basically a coup d'etat. The kingmaker, Mr. Obama, was the king breaker. He was not happy. They didn't show it in the live feed. They made sure no cameras showed it, but the photographs during the speech of the crowd was half. The place was half empty. I wondered because the cheers were very limpid, and not
Mhm.
just because he's not a, much liked or a popular man. I mean, if one has followed his career, he's been kind of a nasty guy. So um, anyway, and now he's suffering the dementia, which I had warned people since 2018 was coming, and I even said on Coast to Coast to 20 million people, I said in 2019, I said, "Is this the best you have? You don't have other talented people, seasoned people to run this man who's cognitively declining?" And I also wrote about the great danger that would be to the country in his astrology when I read his difficult aspects with his Jupiter squared in all kinds of ways possible, um, in ways that are it shocked me to see it. I didn't even want to write about it, but I had to. I basically said, and it's all I read the Hogue prophecy report, all my dated prophecies. Um, you'll find out that I said that where Trump, to be fair, Trump did not avoid getting into a war in the 4 years he was president. He was lucky enough not to unconsciously channel people like Pompeo and Bolton, who were channeling themselves through him to make wars. I have found out, though, that he, from people that were inside those meetings, that he often felt uh, bad about going to war. He's not eager to blow things up. Now, he may blow things up anyway, because he almost got us into 3 wars in his term, but that resistance to doing it, sometimes, well, fortunately for us, it avoided the war in 2019 with the drone shot down in Iran. That could have been Iran war then. He didn't, so that's when his channeling kind of countermanded Bolton. But the other time, his channeling with his problems with it in his chart, Trump's chart, made him also just blindly listen to John Bolton, when clearly the hit on Soleimani was an assassination attempt of revenge of the CIA, settling scores that were decades old and really had nothing to do with the current situation. And that really came close to full-scale war. So by the man's great luck, as he has a great powerful north node, true north, which is your luck star, and his isn't remarkable, but it's also very unpredictable, with Uranus conjoined it and also his sun in Gemini. The what Biden has, I absolutely was assured, unfortunately, that when I looked at his chart before I published it before the elections on Halloween on 2020, the election was several days away. I put it right out there and said, this man will not only start a war, this man may start the big war, World War III. And he has very much fulfilled that by being an empty vehicle for a deep state, a uniparty, a plutocracy that we never vote for, although some of the people that they choose through their money for us to vote without, they get another puppet in. Biden, with his cognitive decline, was actually an advantage to those forces. They just keep old grandpa out of everything as much as possible, keep him from doing interviews, keep him down in his basement for most of the election process, and just kind of roll him in there, and then get a cabinet around him that would really be playing president. And of course, the structural flaws with that is that's not what the Constitution gave us as a government. And whenever you have a weak president to surround, you will see a lot of chaos in the policies of that president because he's not at the helm. There's a lot of things people could say about Ronald Reagan, but and had some cognitive declining at the end of his second term. But if you looked at his chart, he had a magnificent executive branch capability, that he had that rare gift of somebody who knows how to pick good people and do most of the heavy work. And if he's picked right, then his job is relatively easy in comparison. He knows that they've all worked out all those stages, and when it comes to him, he can make a clear decision. One example of that, of a living leader, one of the greatest, most significant leaders in our time, Vladimir Putin, the president of Russia, he has a magnificent executive skill, he even transcends Reagan. And I've even watched his Security Council, which is the main body, and they don't always agree with him. It's a much more democratic in a way. He might have an idea, and if they shoot it down, he probably will amend it. He won't, like, well, I'm the president, I'll do it anyway. I mean, the way in which the mainstream media has completely obliterated the truth about this man is very dangerous for your health, because being misinformed, you are already stepping closer and closer. All of us are stepping into with our eyes wide open into catastrophes that could happen from the Ukraine front, the things that are going on with Iran and Israel and Hezbollah, and also this effort, which is still very strong, to take us into a war with China over Taiwan. It's but World War III will happen if enough people remain completely uninformed, if enough people vote for candidates that are actually not qualified to even be there. I mean, Biden was not qualified because of his mental illness. Kamala Harris, who I've been looking at since for 4 or 5 years now, astrologically and all, she is it's not a healthy thing to see a person who could be president of the United States who is afraid to be interviewed. It's another version of Mr. Biden in his basement in Delaware. Why is he hiding? What's going on? Same with her. Why has she not done a single interview with and now she wants not to do a debate with Trump at Fox. Why not? You think Fox is going to be a serious place anti-Kamala to deal with? Wait till you're sitting with Vladimir Putin. Wait till you're sitting with Xi Jinping of China. You're talking whether, beyond what their politics are, these are major world leaders like the others before. We may be against them now, but, they may even be the guys with the white hats, the good guys compared to us. You will never test that statement in CNN. And if the and so she is trying to get out of the debates. She is trying to not have to do a speech. And when she's on script, just like Mr. Biden, I don't see much of a difference between these two, except one had a real problem with his mental decline. Well, this person apparently has all her brain cells intact, but she is mediocrity. And this huge flood of the big money coming into her. She's made half $500 million now. She's all that money that they froze on Biden. That's what got him out. All the money people, not these are corporations and super delegates, and they're not you and I. They're the aristocracy. They're not you and I. This country was a republic. We shouldn't have an aristocracy, but it's becoming an ancient regime, just like the French had with Louis the 18th or Louis the 16th, that is. And so that's a problem, because this country was not built to be a kingdom with a plutocracy running it. And it was because it was part of a kingdom, an empire with a plutocracy running it, with George III as the figurehead, that we had a revolution about it. So, and it was not, they didn't want, the British citizens of the American colonies didn't want to have a revolution. And strangely enough, when the revolution finally happened, the 1/3 of the people were fighting it, 1/3 were trying to stay out of it, and 1/3 were defending the British Empire. So the 1.3 million people of the 13 colonies, there was only 1/3 of them that actually fought the American Revolution and won it. So she is in Kabbalah, the ancient Hebrew, Judaic religion, the roots. I'm not talking about the post-Babylonian captivity period, where that was a lot of actually Zoroastrian influence, a lot of Persian influence, because Cyrus had rebuilt the kingdoms of Israel and Judah, I think, after the Jewish captivity in Babylon. So we have this number 47, the 47th president. If Kamala is elected, or if Kamala is chosen, not by us, the American people, but by the powers that be, to be the new person to tie strings of the deep state upon, she will have got there by not actually winning any primary. She got out of the 2020 primaries in Iowa. She was absolutely a terrible campaigner, and she didn't win 1% of the vote. Suddenly, Obama has placed her at the heartbeat away from the president, a feeble president, and lo and behold, now his channel and his side of the deep state and the Clintons are actually Kamala has been a vehicle and a student of both. So you can see that the cabinet is a mix of Clintonians, Scully, and what's his name, Jake Sullivan, and you have the Obama people, Newland. Newland was kind of both, but anyway, the number 47 is rather shocking in what it means. It in a vulgar sense, the number is called dead man walking number. But another way to put it is a amoral, vacuous, open channel that will do the bidding of those who placed him or her there, 47th president. Trump doesn't have this problem if he is elected, because basically what's happening is the 45th or the 46th president is coming back. No, that was Biden. His 45th president is coming back to finish his second term. So it's a different vibratory, but this, you're born at the, you don't change your number at the second term. So I saw that she would be somebody who would be completely under the control of these people. Even more so, she's a perfect, if they've been looking for the last 20 years for somebody who could really play the channel for the deep state, they may have found that person. And I tell you, it is democracy. The theme of this election could end up being the misplacement or the forgetting of or the death of America as a democracy. It is, I was saying in the last things that we did that I argued in favor of that sometimes when things go too extreme, that it might be good to counterbalance it by going a little more. I said right now what the nation needs is a little right of center, not extreme left over the cliff. This woke plague, as some people call it, a plague of mind, is in another name is very similar to Bolshevism. How the Bolsheviks took over, they called themselves the big party. Bolshoi means big in Russian, but they were actually a very small party. The Mensheviks, who were a very large party, were called the little party, but they were actually a lot of people. The Bolsheviks were ruthless, and they were self-righteous to a blind extreme. They were 1 and 0 kind of people, binary. If you debated them and if it didn't follow their walk with them and march with them like the communists do, then you were again an enemy of the state, or you were a bourgeois. They would just label you and shut you up, and they'd shout you down. And And then they used lawfare. And then they used gulags. And then they used the bullet in purges like Stalin did. What I see arising out of this convention is the first vestiges of an American version of Stalinism. And if it is Stalinism, it will have its purges, show trials. You know, you will have to, by rote, repeat whatever our great leader says, Miss Harris, and you will have behind her a vice president who very kind of Bolshevik in his behavior. When there was the death of the black man because of the policeman murdering him on camera, and not too abashed about it. That was terrible. The knee on the neck, I can't breathe. It was terrible. But he's the guy behind blaming the police. He's the guy behind stepping back, undermining the law enforcement in Minneapolis, and it burned in the summer of 2020. It was burning. And uh, you know, he this is the kind of guy, you give this guy power, he will just that's like a Stalinist purge. And you're either part of the proletariats or you're the bourgeoisie. And if you're the proletariats, you're fine, although they'll exploit you and get rid of you for other things as well. Because, the problem with this is, with all the protesting too much about people and needs and freedom, what I'm seeing are people that have no respect for soul, no respect for being. Like the Stalinists, well, in a different way, these people like to talk about virtue and all, but watch their actions. They shut you down. If you have a different voice, you're shut down. They're trying to take a candidate for president. They already shut down Bobby Kennedy's run by making him have to spend most of his time trying to just get on the ballot. And so, I kind of saw this coming. Interestingly enough, I saw maybe a half a year ago, I wrote about the possibility of a unity ticket. And I thought, well, at that time, since things were not picked yet, that I think Trump was actually trying to get Kennedy to run as his vice president. Now it's very likely that he will probably be the attorney general if Trump is elected. And the attempt to shut him, so here it's literally the system is saying, oh yeah, you got your democracy and your constitution, but this is only going to be a two-party system. And I would actually rename the Democratic Party. I don't usually call them Democratic Party. People say, why not? I said, well, it's because it's not democratic. So I call it the Democrat Party. Emphasis on the rat, because it's ratting out on democracy. The other thing is, I'm going to change the name now, and it might spread, because your brain can easily start replacing democratic. Almost did it there, with the new name I'm calling them. They are the Demographic Party. They are a party that is literally trying to change the demography of this country into a Stalinist one-party system. And they're doing it through all these illegal aliens. That is not a crack brain right-wing fantasy. I've studied it deeply. I'm not right-wing or left-wing. I'm looking at the data. I'm seeing that it is happening, that people that have been are being fast-tracked to get their citizenship, jumping all kinds of hoops that take people usually years to get it done fast, so that tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of people on the list to become citizens who've already crossed the border illegally will become citizens. And the arrangement is, you got to vote our way. So I mean, the way people have been coming in, the way that the Homeland Security, I guess it's the security for the Democrats, not for other people. To have a secure government that will be one party system, which will never be taken out of office. The way they're doing it is there's even some states that are trying to get a law going where you can declare yourself a a citizen of the United States if you feel you already are. Not you haven't gone through the tests and learned the Constitution or do all the things that a person has to do to as an immigrant to become a citizen of this country. It's just if it's your opinion that you're an American. There's actually some states that are doing that. And I have, you know, the best thing I can do on this show, I'm going to be basically laying out some bombshells. But if you really want to see the nuts and bolts of it, to see if it's not just throwing crazy stuff out there, become a member of the Hogue Prophecy Report, because I have all the links to all these sources that show this is really going on. And it's constantly being shadow banned and taken off mainstream media. I mean, it's amazing that Elon Musk, I mean, he has its faults, but so do all of us. But that's also part of being in a free society. You could have your faults, but at least you can be critical to the man. If you are critical to the woke movement, they'll go, shut up, take him off he's got misinformation, classic Stalinist phrase, misinformation. And suddenly you're undermined. I mean, I'm not on Coast to Coast anymore because, the truths that I've been bringing all these decades and are now being fulfilled in ways I wish they never did are now it's got to be misinformation. Got to ban Mr. Hogue from being on the show. Uh, so there's I'm not talking about some distant abstract thing. I'm living through it. And so are many of the people who want to give you another take on what's going on in the world. And I mean, I watch CNN and all those things too. I'm always watching everybody. And that's what all of you should be doing as well. Because if you can then retain your ability to critically think and not get lost in, this emotive, um, kind of like a communist mass rally. Have you ever seen the footage during the Cultural Revolution in the late 60s when Mao was literally millions and millions of all these people in the same clothes and they're all holding the little red book and they're all getting the whole mass of millions of people are getting all totally emotional and subservient to Mao sitting there like some communist god, atheistic god. And we're heading for that. We won't do it like Mao did and the Chinese did. We'll do it in an American way, variation, but that's coming up. That's where people mob think is where you're supposed to think. You're not supposed to be an individual. I mean, guys, we are making Ayn Rand right. This is, and Atlas Shrugged and all of that. We are, it literally, the individual is under siege. Free thought is under siege. Having criticisms about people or questions is verboten. You're all supposed to be tovarisha, comrades in the glorious revolution in the new world of joy. When Kamala was using the term of this is a race, a campaign of joy, it reminded me of some of the slogans that the Nazis used. What was the one about joy? Work. Well, of course, the ironic one at Auschwitz was Arbeit macht frei. Work sets you free. Somebody had a very dark sense of humor with that one because they were being worked to death if they were not gassed. But there was another one about something through joy. It was about vacations and being happy, and you must be happy. You know, don't you have to be happy the way we say it is to be happy. And so I'll have the phrase from the Nazi times when I publish my next thing in the end of September. But it just I first thought about it. This is like the what the Nazis used to do in their vacations, where the folk went out and they're all vacationing together out on the beach, and they're constantly having to go to meetings and get indoctrinated further and further. And that's that's I'll simply say it. That's what's behind the mask, the cardboard cutout human being that is Kamala Harris if she's elected president. Um, if she's elected president, mainly because she's the perfect foil for this. There will be forces that are speaking through her, and she will literally, it's almost like she's a non-entity, a number 47. Uh, because I saw her already crumble. I had hope when when Netanyahu was coming to speak to both houses of the United States Congress. She actually was saying, got very emotional in a good way, saying she was watching a lot of what I was watching, the torn bodies, the massacres of Palestinians, the fact that she's still not catching up with the real numbers, which are probably more like close to 250,000 now. Um, I was saying 200,000 before, 186,000 from the Lancet pages, but there's a whole lot of time has gone by, and there's not a lot of food getting into that area, and we could be approaching 250,000 Palestinian people, civilians, very sick or dying or starving. And she saw some of that. She's like, I'm gonna talk hard. I'm gonna talk hard to Netanyahu. Well, she supposedly had this icy meeting where she was just more icy than talking to him, apparently, but just very cold to him. And I mean, maybe she was trying to put on her best face of what she does with her staff. I was just seeing some really shocking stuff from people who used to be on her staff, which feel like they have to step up out and say something about it. She had a very toxic relationship with her staff. She had something like 37 or 40 people that came into her staff, and only 4 are still there from the original group. They've all changed. When she was Attorney General, she wanted everybody when she came in the morning to say, "Good morning, General." Yeah, it's, I mean, how pathetic. And so, I mean, this should be the Veep. She should be the real Veep playing president. And at least that was funny. There's some parallels to that HBO series. I think it was HBO or Showtime, the Veep, where a woman became president as a vice president, and she was just kind of winging it. And so, so the other thing was that only certain closer aides could look at her in the eye. The underlings could not, they had to revert their eyes. They'd have to say, "Well, Miss Harris, I suggested you do this and that." And only her top few people, chosen people, were permitted to look right into Kamala Harris's eyes. This kind of stuff. I mean, this is what was in her astrology, and I was kind of hoping that there was a really. I actually tried to write very more positive than any other people of the people that were running for vice president and president in 2020. I tried to find a way. If ever I was biased in trying to find some spark of soul in this person, some spark of intelligence, or maybe a latent intelligence that only the shock of being given power on rare occasions, people rise up to it. I tried my hardest, but it's just not there. And now just these things that are happening, if you ever actually study her record as Attorney General, I mean, it was a travesty. And it was she well, again, come and go on X and go and watch Tulsi Gabbard's 2 minutes where she completely eviscerated Kamala Harris in the first debate in 2020 in Iowa. And Kamala couldn't respond to it. She couldn't respond to an attack. She just kind of licked there and gone, and then she, rather than address the things that were said, she kind of started to do kind of some slogan-y thing, and then Tulsi Gabbard went after her even harder. And then she just couldn't, she was grilled. and and that's going to be your president. This is the person that's going to handle AIPAC and Netanyahu and the Zionists who are committing genocides. She's more likely to just wag like a puppy dog and say, "What do you want us to do?" There's no one there that's a leader. The biggest irony is that she may, if she's elected president, she may actually be the first president in history that never actually got a real vote. She's very close to that already. She didn't get voted into the primaries. She didn't even she was out right at the beginning. Now she is going to the primary elected Biden. It didn't elect her. But Obama came in, and the superdelegates, as they've often done in the last 3 election cycles, which is 3 steps to the end of democracy in the Democrat Party, it's gone. And so the people's voice was not even asked. And as the primary was going, they were changing the primary. They were not doing primaries. They were saying in New Hampshire, for instance, I said this last week or a week, 2 weeks ago, that New Hampshire wanted to have the primary anyway, but then the delegates said, "Well, we'll change the rules." Now we change it that whatever people vote for, whoever they vote for, it's all going to Biden. So that's not democracy. And if that gets 4 more years, I assure you it won't be 4 more years. We may see, if we've been in this danger of wars has been so difficult in regards to Biden and his mental deficiencies and the kind of people that are the military industrial complex and big pharma, the SIC, the sickness industrial complex, and the justice system, the revenge industrial complex, not justice, revenge. I don't know what has to happen. I'm pretty sure now, the way I'm feeling now is Trump. I'll say this cryptic thing again, because it's, sometimes prophecy is cryptic. The message is cryptic, I know. Trump is the man destined to be our president, if they let him. He's already had an assassination attempt. Do you see anybody doing assassination attempts on Kamala Harris or Joe Biden? do you see candidates being completely using lawfare to suppress them being on the ballot boxes in 50 states, to the point where Kennedy, who wanted to run in the Democratic convention, wanted to run in the primaries, but they basically threw him out because woke was the world there. And here's a Kennedy, you know, Democrat incarnate, Democratic incarnate party, a Kennedy that knew his uncle and his father, Robert Kennedy and John F. Kennedy, who were killed, assassinated, and the Bidens weren't going to give them any USSS people, any Secret Service. I mean, it took Trump getting clipped in the ear with a bullet to where he turned around and said, "Give Bobby a detail," and Biden had to do it. I mean, so, we are, just look at actions. The people who have a different view are being silenced. They're being dragged into ways in which they cannot reach people. None of the mainstream news lets Kennedy even appear. I mean, ironically, the mainstream news for that farewell, when he froze his campaign, that was the first time tens of millions of people even knew about him. I mean, if you own the media, well, like a banana republic in South America that owns the media, well, then you filter out any alternative voice. You project in their void that they're evil, that they're full of misinformation, they're conspiracy theorists. And if you just keep listening to that, you're going down the primrose path, and so is this country. This country, if it goes in this direction, will not be a democracy anymore. So what will it be? It will be a totalitarian state that talks about democracy. And, as I said before on the show, Huxley, who wrote a Brave New World Revisited, a review of the dystopian epic masterpiece of Brave New World. And he wrote it in the mid-60s, and he wrote this amazing quote where he said, well, the way fascism comes into the United States is no one will call it that. They'll still call it democracy. They'll still be the House and Senate. They'll still be the Supreme Court and the president. And all the verbiage of state will not be changed. But you will basically, it's just window dressing on a plutocracy, on a dictatorship. The media will fall in step. It has fallen in step. And those of us, and a lot of people who are with the alternative media used to be famous people in the media, that were silenced. I mean, one of them just died recently. Just this week, the talk show host with the silver hair. I can't remember his name at the moment.
Donahue?
Yeah, Philip Donahue. Philip Donahue was one of the few voices in 2002. He was one of the only voices that was questioning why we were going to war and whether the weapons of mass destruction that Saddam was supposed to have, that the story wasn't working out. And he actually, on his show with the crowd and audience, he was basically calling this a hoax. And he was fired. And around the same time, the Middle Eastern head chief for New York Times, Chris Hedges, another remarkable, he's a liberal journalist, but a great one. But he's still working in the alternative media. But he wrote some articles in the New York Times where he kind of devastated the whole theory that there was weapons of mass destruction, and he got fired too. He said, "You'll never be able. You will always have to check your stories and and go through a process. And then he said, well, then I resigned because I didn't come to work for a bunch of Stalinists. I came to work for, I added that, but in so many words, it was the same input. And then, of course, one of the people at the time in 2002, 2003 that I became aware of back then was a former Marine major. And then for like 9 years during in between the Gulf War and what became Operation Iraqi Freedom, had been spending 7 years in Iraq, mostly hunting down all the weapons of mass destruction, and with his crews. And he was very good at it. His name's Scott Ritter. And it was Joe Biden who famously grilled him before the Senate in a really nasty way, just grinning like a cat would caught a mouse. Of course, Scott's a Marine, and he just took it. He just straight looked right into his eyes and just took it. He didn't react. He just was neutral. It was so bad that Scott related that a lot of the senates from both sides of the bench came up to him and said, "We're sorry. We apologize. That was a terrible act, what Biden just did. And it's so disrespectful to your service in the UN as well as in the Marines." I mean, he was in the staff. He was on the staff of General Schwarzkopf during the Persian Gulf War. He was the guy hunting the Scuds because that was his specialty. Before then, when the INF Treaty was signed in the late 80s, which saved us from blowing the world up around that time, he was in Russia, overseeing the destruction of SS-20 missiles, Scud-like size missiles, that were the Soviet version of the Pershing II missiles that America had flooded the European range with. And this was a really dangerous time because there were all these several thousand missiles on either side, on mobile launchers, so they can move around. And in less than 5 minutes, Europe would have disappeared and Russia would have disappeared. And while it was disappearing, the dead man switch would have launched all the missiles to blow us away. It was very, very dangerous. And that was a time when we had a lot more than we have now. And so the INF Treaty, strangely enough, Ronald Reagan saw the day after, which was a movie in the early 1983 that I remember when it first came out, I was watching him, and he came on and did this a little speech after the movie, and saying, that we're trying not to have this ever happen, what you just saw. It's quite graphic about nuclear war. I think everybody should see that movie. And another movie called Threads, which the British created a little later. Those two movies everybody should watch, especially in America, so that you understand. And this is only a bit of what it would be like. Nuclear war should never be fought. It is nuclear bombs and weapons should only be a deterrent to fighting, to going all the way on somebody. And we're in a situation now where, as I've been writing accurately down the last few years, Ukrainians are losing. The line in eastern Ukraine is unraveling. It's unraveling slowly like an avalanche unleashes itself on a mountainside. And we're starting to see the pebbles start bouncing off the hill. But when it goes, it'll go all at once. And because of these leaders in the West have talked themselves into thinking they can win a nuclear war, or that the Russians just won't retaliate if we launch a few low-yield tactical nuclear weapons at them. Well, that'll show the Russians, that'll scare those people, get those orcs, and they won't do it. You'll all be dead if that happens. And you won't even know why. You won't even know what fools and idiots you were talked into through your media to vote for, that pushed a button and blew your lives and your family's lives away, your race, your humanity away. And it's what I try to do in my work is go there and talk about those things because they need to be talked about. You're everything that you love and cherish in your lives right now, all your hopes, all the things that you wish to have are on the lave of nuclear war. And there are so many ways that it could be struck. I mean, and I'm not aloof to it. I'm with you. The difference is I'm aware of it. I can see it coming. And I can see people unconsciously motivated to not think, just feel, not question, just obey. And that is, we're all lemmings marching to the cliff. Some lemmings, like myself, wake up and realize that I'm being pushed to the cliff by the other guys. So I'm sometimes trying to squeak here and there to the other lemmings to say, hey, don't go over that cliff. So the so a little bit about Trump now. Trump has a lot of faults, and I have been, for those who don't, when they hear, I mean, it is really a mind field, a field of minds that blow up if you step on either a woke person's idea or a blind MAGA believer's idea of what should be. And I got both sides saying, don't light my mind off in an explosion of violence and anger and emotion and all that about you bad-mouthing my Trump, you bad-mouthing my Kamala. In the weighing of both candidates, and I've not come to this lightly, but I see a chance for a Trump administration, a Trump-Vance administration, to actually try to stop the wars, try to nation build this land rather than squander it on hopeless lands out there that we've already half destroyed before we try to build them, like, Afghanistan and all of that, and just come back. And I think what happened this week is a big chance that might happen because of what Kennedy did. I mean, if you can go on X or wherever you want to that can get it and watch what happened watch Kennedy's speech where he's leaving and why. It's interesting what he's doing. He is he's going to keep himself. He's still in the election. He's not quit. He suspended his campaign. That's what he said. And so he said, if you're in a non-battleground state, I'm going to still be on the ballot. If you want to vote for me on those non-battleground states, it won't make a difference one way or the other, whether you vote for me in the red state or a blue state. But I am going to take my ballot, my name off all the battleground states. Because I said in the beginning of this, and he did, he said, I've not come into this race to be a spoiler. And so, what he was seeing is that a lot of the people that were interested in his agenda were really also interested in Trump. So he was seeing that he was going to pull votes away from Trump in the battleground states. So he's not going to be, you can't, unless you want to write him in, he's not going to be on those ballots. And that is, at one point when Trump was behind a couple points, if 4.5 to 5% of the voters are pro-Kennedy and want to unite with a unity party, that just jumped him 5 percentile points across the country in a lot of the battleground states. Also, a lot of those polls are really even polls of, I mean, they remind me of Soviet polls. Soviet Union political poll. Our glorious leader is going to win. You know, look how all this money just happened. Look how everybody, she got such a big bump. She's she's wonderful. She's better than crepe Suzettes. She's gosh. And yet, with all that behind her, she's hiding from the press. She doesn't want you to see her when she's had a few, which she has a drinking problem. It and that's she gets really silly in her speeches when she's drinking. So, no, kind of keep the bottle away from Kamala. Um, and, and so, uh, so Kennedy coming in the Trump situation, it could be interesting. The whole idea, the general drift of what a lot of people want to see Trump do is remove the deep state, fire them, get them out of the governmental machinery, and and get people who simply serve the country, not as a government within the government. You know, there I'm going to write more about it, so I hope you join the Hogue Prophecy Report if you haven't already, because in October I will be writing my overview about this and how it'll be detailed, and it will look at, you know, I really think there's a future for us, for this nation, a very difficult time of trying to kind of come home to America and stop being a superpower and just take care of our own people. And it's going to be necessary, and Trump will probably do it, and Kennedy will probably have to go along with it. But it's already happening in England, in Britain. Um, this whole demographic war against European society and American society, that has to stop. That has to stop. And millions of people that have been allowed to come here so that they can fake vote their way into making a one Democrat Party system in this country, a lot of those people are going to be deported. Millions. And, you know, this is uh, the kind of lawlessness and things that are happening. There are gangs now in our country that were never in this big. A lot of the people who are coming over are involved in the Mexican gangs. It's not being reported a lot, but there's much more higher crime than ever before. Danger to be on our streets. Similarly, it's happening in Europe with all the people that were just allowed to crowd into Europe, who are basically not, the way immigration works is you come to a country and you integrate into the country. And we are a nation of immigrants, and it's been a very important thing about what makes America an interesting melting pot in a unique place, a kind of a international population in a nation, in a way. For over a century, it's been like that. Now, we've always opened the gates to more people when we've needed more people, more talent, more, well, farmers and things like that when the nation was growing. Um, but this this flood of people is not needed by our country. They are imposing themselves, and they are being encouraged by people who want to, I'll say it one last time, make the Democratic Party, the demographic party, the single party system. And if we have gotten fat and sassy, politically speaking. We have And the government has helped it over the decades, over the generations, by taking away our civics classes, taking away, I mean, most Americans are completely illiterate about their rights and how the government's supposed to work, how the House and Senate is supposed to function, the tiered balancing act that our founding fathers created. These, even in the fundamentals, people don't know. And it's gotten so diseducated now in our time, the time that Nostradamus said, "Oh, what a terrible loss of learning and letters in our time," and that people are not intelligent enough to choose. You know, it's they like Kamala's face. You know, it's not like they don't even know how to ask the questions that have to be asked. Like, why have you suddenly come out of nowhere, and why can you talk about all these promises that things are going to happen in your administration when you haven't done a goddamn thing in 3.5 years? You're supposed to be part of this administration, or were you put out as pastor somewhere until you were rolled in now? I mean, what is going on here? Uh, are you even aware that can you even think that wait a minute, um, she's going to do all these things. It all sounds good and going to respect women and everything's going to be fine. But why didn't she do this since 2021? Why hasn't, the board, she's supposed to have been the border czar and she was supposed to clean up all that problem there. Not only did she never get to the border, but I guess what the border czar did was just escape from the border and let everybody flood in. This person is a joke. Um, and I know if people have kind of drank the Kool-Aid about how wonderful is it, this new, fresh, young woman is going to be there. Um, I would say to women, if you really want to break the glass ceiling, don't do it with her. Otherwise, I think you might have a generation where no women will be president from what's coming with her being there. I mean, the shape of one's genitals should not be the judging point of one's wisdom and intelligence, man or woman. They have to be leaders. They have to have a clear agenda, a vision, not fluff that somebody else written to stuff into their mouths. Um, and if you're just looking at people from their gender identity, then that's pretty shallow. It's skin deep. I mean, I've always loved to have women be leaders, but I will not identify a soul by what transitory genitalia shape they have in this visit, in these bodies, in these lives that we live here in this phenomenal and changing world. Oh, it's the soul has no sexuality. The soul transcends male or female. The soul, the eternal soul is lux eterna, the eternal light, and it's all in us. We're so busy trying to find it that we don't look inside. You can't find what you already are. And it transcends what your skin color is, what your genitalia are, what your hormones do in one way or another, your yin, your yang. These are the containers. There's a container that, like a wave shape of the ocean, that has an identity, uh, and then identity means under the illusion of thinking you're separate from the ocean. I guess all the waves, because they see each other's shapes moving and just battling with each other and etc., are under the illusion that they're not connected to the ocean. What's inside a wave but the ocean? The same salt, the same salty sea, every wave. And that's the same with all of us. The God spark, the divine mystery is in everyone. whatever their outside activity is or not, whether they're acting good or evil, whether they're Adolf Hitler or Jesus Christ, it's the same. And the deeper one goes into that, I contend, something that has been my whole life's process, is to stop running around looking for things that I already am and have always been. And it's the same for you. We're all equally unique in the shaping of this, but it's the same ocean. And that's why um, if people could really not just think that or feel that, but be that, which is a very deeper relaxation into it, then how can there be wars? How can there be disharmony? When you realize, when everyone on all sides realize whoever you were once struggling with are the same divine spark. It's just the pretense of the shell, the ego and the ego dialectic vehicle that we have to be born into it in our visit to this place. And then when we leave that aside as well. But instead of just understanding that and keeping the thread that we came into the world with, we we're trained early on to forget the thread of the oceanic and believe that we're this walking, talking fool, this ego that believes it's separate, that everything is separate, that there's no harmony with no connection. You have to find it. You have to strive for it. You have to work. All these are the ways that the ego and the mind make time because they need goals to be fulfilled, and to fulfill your goals takes time. So now you're living in the very narrow world of the illusory mind. But at all times, whether you're aware of it or not, there's a space inside you that witnesses all of it. And when that is engaged, the way one's behavior on this planet is changes. One becomes more alert, more loving, more understanding of things. So, to Russia, with love, I wish, Mr. Bond, Inspector, but with Russia with love, yes, a good movie. But the movie we're projecting now is not so good about Russia. As I've said before, our greatest prophet, Edgar Casey, saw Russia, the Russia of our times, as the hope of the world. So it would appear that, according to his vision in 1944, that this malign country of Russia, that we're throwing everything at it, maybe it's because we're the problem. You ever notice that? So in a simple Americanese kind of good guy, bad guy moment, uh, when you're wearing the white hat and you're the good guy, it's great. But nobody, when they turn into the black hat bad guy, ever can imagine that they're the bad guy. Adolf Hitler didn't think he was a bad guy. He thought he was saving the world. He really thought that he had to do terrible things. He knew the Holocaust was terrible. So did Himmler, and I've got the quotes when they're talking about it. But this whole concept that the problem is a certain race of people. It used to be Jews, now it's Palestinians. Same old insanity. That if we eradicate these people, things will be better. If these people, if we scapegoat people, now we're scapegoating Russia. Russia are the new Jews in this fourth turning, in this Third World War. They're the new Jews. Blame it all on the Russians. It's all the Russians are evil and all that. Well, I think evil speaks in our mouths to others in this regard. We are speaking evil because we're speaking ignorance. We're speaking rote things that people we don't even know, who are news anchors and TV personalities, you know, playing Big Brother in 1984, and we're the idiots listening. You know, Big Brother is telling us the Russians are evil. Well, step back and realize that that's our use of evil on other people. I mean, why not talk to them? My God, you can go online. That's why they're trying to ban X, because in all these groups, Telegram now is under attack. The person who created the Russian who created Telegram, who left Russia, made a very stupid mistake because there was a jurisdiction already to do this, but for some reason he stepped into France. He was arrested, and now he's probably facing 20 years because he's not measuring up to the European Union, this technocratic dictatorship that doesn't listen to the people. It's kind of a aristocracy now that's kind of taken over. They want to ban Elon Musk and X and ban Telegram, which is also huge all over the world, um, because people are talking misinformation. Who the hell chose them to decide what the Constitution doesn't say in the First Amendment? You have freedom of speech, but you can't talk misinformation. It's not. Go read it. It's not there. If you have a problem with free speech bringing more and more misinformation into the world, then the answer to it is more free speech, not silence. And Waltz, this character that wants to be the vice president. I was watching him just today. He was saying, you know, yes, free speech, but I still feel we really got to do something about people who are not telling that are misleading people. And well, who are you to judge whether the misleading is? Because it doesn't agree with your worldview, your political view. Therefore, it's bad speech. Speech is speech, and it will be ugly. And that is just grow up, guys. This is what it is to be in a democracy. People are going to say, a lot of people are going to say amazing things and thoughtful things, and some people, the cadre, will always be saying stupid things. And I don't want to ban anyone that I've ever viewed as stupid. I'm you know, it used to happen when I was on these shows. There'd be some person would have a really kind of silly thing, and I'd call them out and say, "Well, I think that's really a dumb idea." And you're like, "Oh, but I have a right to have an opinion." And it's as if I, just by not agreeing with him or disagreeing with him, he sort of was hurt. Like somehow I had tread over a First Amendment thing that he hadn't ever even read. And I said, well, no one's, I defend your right to have an opinion. And, but don't presume that your opinion has to be agreed upon. You know, that's what's happening with the Democratic Party. They have certain opinions that they're making a holy writ, that they're making dogma. And if you disagree with it, shut down. That's fascism. That's Stalinism, people. That's Bolshevism. And so, no, I've never wanted any of the people who are critical of me to be banned. I was very much against it when the man, the British historian who championed this idea that the Holocaust never happened. I totally disagree with him, and he doesn't seem to understand there's a mountain of evidence to prove it because the Germans always kept lots of records. And here, even with that, this man was saying it. Now, uh, I I would always tear down what he's saying and expose what he's saying, and I would allow him to be free to say it. I'm not going to. He started to get arrested and put in prison in Europe. I said, "Oh man, that's whatever this man's saying is nothing compared to the evil you're doing by silencing him. If he's a fool, reveal his foolishness." Through talking, through challenging, through data, through debate. But if you're just a lazy Stalinist, you just throw him in the gulag. And I don't agree with any of the things that man was saying. I don't agree with the sometimes rather mean and manipulative things that were directly thrown at me by the mentalist James Randi. He said, I'm out on a crusade to destroy your career and defame you and all that. But I tell you this, if somebody had ever tried to ban him, I would defend him. I don't like his views, but I do like that if he's got views that I don't like, I can say something about it. I can show how wrong they are, which I have over the years. Um, but when a person moves to that, to just, oh, let's just shut this guy up, that's infantile. That's kids in a sandlot. I don't want to hear you anymore. This is 7-year-old stuff. There's so many people who are living their lives. They're full adults, in their 40s, 50s, or 80s, whatever. But you can sometimes, if you have a wrong opinion to them, you immediately see that their intelligence had arrested its growth at either the age of 7 or the age of 14 in puberty. And that suddenly, and then literally acting like a kid, melting down, not getting what they want. And they're like 60 years old, have lived a life and have degrees and all of this. And it's tragic, but I'm not going to suppress them. I'm going to let everybody speak. No banning. So that I see there's more chance, and there's going to be a lot of difficult things with Trump being president, but on the weighing of the two, I see there's a chance for the country to really challenge Trump if he's really going to go there. If he has learned, and he's not going to start picking a bunch of neocons and people again. It seems this might sound odd to a lot of your people, but he's actually trying to grow in his own Trumpian way. And he's got courage. I saw that when he was shot. The man has courage, and that's important for your leader. You don't want, I don't see any brave courage in Kamala Harris. I don't see that in Biden. I mean, if I'm wrong, encounter me about it. And then, of course, I will respond. So think well. Because, I'm not an easy man to convince, but I'm open. So what's going on in Russia? Russia is, for one thing, the Russians are stoically winning this thing. They, 1,000 years of European history has not taught us it's in our DNA to completely misunderstand and misjudge every move the Russians make, and then make policies and invasions based on those biases. And I've said this a lot on the show, and I won't say much more about that, but we're going to get this rude awakening when Ukraine's going to collapse. And the danger I'm concerned about, they could collapse as soon as September, October. It could collapse in the dead of winter. I mean, there's a possibility because the Russians are not into taking Ukraine. They're into destroying the military industrial complex of Ukraine and its army. And they're doing it by waging a war of attrition, and they're doing it quite well. I mean, I'm seeing easily 2,000-3,000 Ukrainians being killed every day. And when you think about that, when Stalin was fighting Hitler, and when Hitler was fighting on all fronts, both the Third Reich and the Soviet Union estimated that they were losing 9,000 killed every day on average, and it adds up. So the Ukrainians are already, making 2,000-3,000 dead a day. That's a third of what World War II was doing with massive alliances and stuff. And so for a little country like that, that might as well be 20,000 a day or 100,000. I don't know. It's just not a good thing for the future of Ukraine. And so, you know, there's going to be, when it breaks up, there's going to be a great temptation to do something rash in the West about it, to scare the Russians from going further. And they're only they don't want to go to the Polish border, but if we keep, you know, there's already now a lot of Americans being in the army now. A lot of the ranks of the Ukrainians are now filled by American mercenaries, and even larger contingents of Poles. This Kursk thing that happened was, everybody's saying it's some big great change. No, it's the Battle of the Bulge. It's I think I said before, it's the repeat of the Battle of the Bulge. The Battle of the Bulge was Hitler trying to throw everything he had left in his strategic reserves at the Western Allies so he could divide them, defeat them, get to Antwerp, cut off their supplies, and then move the same strategic reserve to stop the Russians from taking Berlin. 1944, end of 44, 45. And it was a big army, 200,000 men, and almost all the tanks that they had left, several SS Panzer armies. And what happened is they broke in. It was a complete surprise. The Americans and the British were caught way off guard, just like the Russians were a bit. You know, the signs were there that this Kursk incursion was going to happen. They ended up, their goal was to get to Antwerp. They only got a third of the way. And that bulge of penetration became the name of the famous battle, the bloodiest battle of the Western Front in Europe in World War II, the Battle of the Bulge, for the Allies. And what basically Hitler did is he shortened the war by accident. If he had kept his strategic reserves, the European theater might have been still going by September of 1945, when the war would have ended just with the Japanese remaining after everybody in Europe surrendered. Nazis surrendered in May of 1945. And the future potential of that would have been that some of the atomic bombs might have been launched on Berlin first. Oppenheimer had said that he apologized to all the scientists that we never got a chance to use the bomb on the Nazis. And he did actually say that. So so what's happening here is a similar thing. The Ukrainians are probably end up going to lose another, what's left of their, when this is all done in Kursk, it's probably going to be, the death toll and destruction will be about 30 to 40,000 of their best men. And then what's left is, you know, it's already, and nothing has changed on the line even since 2 weeks ago. The Russians are just, they didn't pull a single soldier out of the Eastern Front. So no Russians were drawn to fight this. You know, the Russians have almost a 2-to-1 numerical superiority right now. So there's a whole lot of Russians that haven't been put in the fight yet. And so if this was supposed to pull people off the front and ease the front, it didn't do it. What it did instead is pulled a lot of really talented soldiers that are still left standing away, and leaving all the badly trained people and the tired people, the people that are too old to be there, which is a big, you know, the average soldier's age in the Ukrainian army is between 40 and 50 years old. I mean, this is for 18-year-olds and 20-year-olds war. And so there's these old duffers out there, and I see it every day. I see it, and they're starting to surrender in droves to the Russians. They are taking care of them. They're taking care of the Ukrainians well. They consider Ukrainians brother Slavs. The other thing that's happened is that Zelensky he really needs to lay off the coke. He's now going against the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, and so thousands of Ukrainians have been gathering to camp out on their churches to prevent the soldiers from taking their priests out and closing the churches. So, you know, he's that there's a lot of people now stopping the Shanghai gangs that are coming and grabbing any guy and beating them up and taking them to a recruitment center. And that's been going on for a year, and there's so much footage of it. It's almost become endemic. The footage is just unbelievable. And you think you do that to your own people, and they're going to want to fight? You think that's going to ingratiate you with your own people? So the Ukrainian people are, they won't want to really say it, but a lot of the Ukrainian people are probably more and more as this goes on, are looking at the Russians as their liberators from their own fascist regime. Um, and so that's happening. It, the Ukrainian, you know, just think Battle of the Bulge and how that ended. And the only good thing about it is that all the killing of the strategic reserves and the destruction of mostly NATO and German tanks, almost all the equipment is NATO now. Not even a vestige of anything of the post-Soviet Ukrainian armed forces that it was Russian built. It's all NATO now, and a lot of NATO people are in the ranks. And so Russia sees it. Well, NATO's already fighting us. This is a war of NATO against Russians to break Russia up. They get it. You have your leaders are openly talking about breaking Russia up, just like Hitler did, just like Napoleon did, just like all the way back, 1242, when the the Teutonic Knights invaded Novgorod. That was the first Western European invasion. If any of you are moviegoers, the Sergei Eisenstein classic film Alexander Nevsky is worth seeing. The music is composed by Prokofiev, one of the great Russian composers. So it's an amazing score. If you want to kind of see the first time, and how ironic it was that that movie was made in the late 30s, and uh, the kind of helmets that a lot of them are wearing, it's not so much propaganda. It's the kind of the steel helmet of the German army with the big fanning around. Well, that was based on the medieval helmets of knights and foot soldiers and stuff. So they just have them more of it there. And at a certain point when the movie came out and there was um, the Nazi Soviet non-aggression pact, the movie was actually, Stalin had it banned. He didn't want anybody to see it because now they were friends with the Germans. And then when the Germans invaded, it got broadcast in all the Soviet theaters again. It became one of the really powerful movies of those times. Looking at it, harkening back to another time when there was when invasions were happening. So Russians know this. The Russians are literate. They remember their history. Do we remember our history? No. And but the Russians are unique that way. They are, even down to the workers in the street. They all read. They all uh, can argue out a problem, and they're always debating about what's going on in Russia in ways that you never see in the United States. Talk about democracy. There's a lot of it going on in Russia right now. It's just not like ours. And we have this idea that all democracies should fit into the same Uncle Sam pants. Well, they don't. Everybody's different. Everybody has a different way of doing the thing. Even the Chinese are trying to balance democracy and free markets. I've talked about that before. And it's even, they're well aware how difficult it is to make to square the circle of that. They may not succeed. It's quite a thing. So that's happening. Now we go to Israel. I woke up this morning to a horrific clouds of flame and fire on the slopes of Lebanon. It looked like the Israelis did a first strike attack, and the attack that followed of Hezbollah was also very large, but it was a little, they were caught off guard. So people are wondering, it's so hard for people in the West to with the struggle that they have with short-term memory, to realize that the Iranians may take months before they strike. They might strike next year. You have a civilization 3,000 years old, doesn't get that old by rushing madly into mistakes and repeating them and then again trying to imagine a different outcome, which is the definition of insanity. Those nations, those civilizations, the Hittites, the other people, all gone. But Egypt's 5,000 years old. China's even older. India is old. These nations last because they've seen it all. They've played the bad guy. They've played the good guy. They played the bad guy again. We're a young country, and we're baby country with nukes. And but some pubescent growing up has to happen now. At the latter half of the 2020s, it might get a chance because the astrology is a lot better for it. A lot of the things that Uranus was doing and Saturn were doing in aspects with other planets, which were really keeping everything fixed. The immovable object of the establishment and the irresistible force of protest were slamming into each other, getting nowhere because of oppositions and squares, which were dominant in the 2010s into the beginning of the 2020s. But now, in the second half of the 2020s, a lot of these things are going to be trying harmoniously aspected. So, what I hope will happen is that people will seriously, sincerely, not reactively, want to see changes. I'm a little concerned because what I'm seeing with the Kamala Harris phenomenon, this hysteria of how great this non-person is that no one knows about and can't even remember whatever she's even done. But suddenly she's going to save the world, and everything. The cows are going to come home, and everything's fine. That kind of childish projection of the mob mind think. Hopefully, this harmonious trine will not strengthen that. But I still haven't delved into that so much yet. But the second half of the 2020s will be different. There'll be more options for change. Hopefully, we'll make wise changes. And hopefully, we'll do them mindful of the foundation of this country and its Constitution. And I would say to all of you, if you haven't read the U.S. Constitution, read it. I think it's only 4,500 words. I mean, there are bills that are million pages that nobody reads, that has all kinds of stuff put into it. I mean, it's one of the things I'd love to see is if that happens, we should have a law that no bill can exceed the wordage of the U.S. Constitution. If you can't, in your bill, define what it's about, whether it's about this issue, that issue, if you can't define it in 4,500 words, then it will not be passed. It simply will not be seen because we don't have time to read millions and millions of words of bureaucratese, which is there to obfuscate, not help. And no more inserting stuff into the bills that have nothing to do with the subject. I mean, do you read a novel and allow the story to go off this way and that way, completely outside of the story? Well, that's what all your bills are doing, and it's corrupt. It's a way people get stuff into bills. Many a bill that should have been passed on its main theme doesn't get passed, not because one party didn't like it or the others, but they've had all this other stuff in it that had nothing to do with the subject. So no more bills that are off the subject. And that kind of stuff should not happen because that's corruption. That's destroying our democracy. So you know, our legislators are going to have to work a little more. They're going to have to, rather than put it all in one bill, they're going to have to pass bills by one at a time, and find a way to do it. And they'll have more time to read the bills when they're only 4,000 words or less. So, um, you know, if Lincoln could write in so few words a speech, the Gettysburg Address, that spoke volumes about the beginning and the current problems of democracy, and how the hope that through this purging in the war of Civil War, it would become better place of the people, for the people, and by the people. I probably got the sequence wrong, but I mean, read that if you haven't read the Gettysburg Address. Um, so now, so I think the Iran thing is still on. I think they're going to strike. They might, I don't know what they're going to strike, but hopefully it will have the impact of, you know, responding to the assassination of Hania and the other people. It's you know, in a way, the Iranians waiting and preparing their defenses. They've already got a whole lot of Russian S-400 systems there, and they're learning them. They're getting their new set of Su-35s and fighter bomber Russian jets that are way class higher than anything we've got. As is their anti-aircraft, anti-missile systems, hypersonic systems. That's a deterrent. The whole point that Putin is saying here with these actions is, and he says it openly, we were putting these as a deterrent. So let's talk. Let's not go to war. Let's not have the Israeli Air Force get shot down over the Persian Gulf, including their U.S. built tankers, air tankers. It's a big, long way to go, and it'll be hit with hostile fire all the way. You know, the IDF Air Force could be shot out of the sky. Then what? Then you see, it's always the same problem when NATO's just about exhausted all of its conventional weaponry. It's given it all, and it's now all rusting in battlefields in Ukraine. You know, you've got aircraft carriers that used to rule the waves, and now they're white elephants. And as silly as battleships in World War II, when air power overseas was taking them down with a few bombs. So you've got weapons that are outdated, weapons that stood still for 34 years when America became this hegemon in this hegemonic period. And as the curse of victory, it's so predictable. Winners never learn from their victory. They say, well, we won, therefore we have nothing to learn. We got it right. And losers always learn from their defeats. And eventually, I mean, the Russians saw their technology, their military industrial system didn't work. They fixed it because they lost the last Cold War. And so, but we just thought, well, you know, history ended with us doing all this stuff. There's no such thing as end of history. Do the oceans stop waving? No. There's no end. It's constant. So they created a situation that, well, the victors always doom themselves to fail and collapse. Rome didn't learn from their empire. British didn't learn. Germans didn't learn. French didn't learn several times. They had two empires in one century. No wonder the French people got exhausted by the 20th century. And the malaise settled down. You had Napoleon the First and Napoleon the Third. So we're now just waiting for more things to happen. It's going to get more intense as we get into October. Definitely, we're heading in the third week of October. We're heading for the final pass of Pluto over its position at the birth of the United States 248 years ago. So the Plutonic era that encompassed America as we know it, has come and is ending. And now the question is, where we have an opportunity to redefine ourselves through this election, or define ourselves unto extinction as a democracy. So that's what this election is about. I am very concerned that it will be rigged again, this time more demographically, by people pretending to be citizens, not following the legal procedure to become citizens. And, basically, I think if that happens, I will never call the Democratic Party Democratic again. I will call it the Demographic Party. And since that is it's easy, you can get the word stuck. I mean, you just watch. If you say Demographic Party a few times, and watch in the day where you might say it rather than Democratic Party. So it has this kind of funny part where, who knows, even Kamala Harris may some there. I hear in her Marge Simpson voice, I hear that there's a new name they're calling our Democratic Party. It's the Demographic Party. And then maybe in this speech, and we of the Demographic Party will, will and solve the problem of illegal aliens and all of that. So anyway.
So I think that maybe we should remind the audience to go and click the link in the description. Make sure that you click that. That'll take you to the website, John's website. That way you can subscribe to the periodical that he has, and then you can also do a reading. Maybe briefly, John, you can explain what the readings are.
The reading is you'll see me just as you see me here in my office. And it's one-on-one, and I'll be seeing you just like I see Paul. And the reading I set it up in such a way that it can be as long as it needs to be to a certain extent. It's a minimum of about 90 minutes, but sometimes it becomes longer because there's more to go into it. It's a journey. It's a journey using astrology to kind of set up what your Kelly Blue Book. Your birth chart is the Kelly Blue Book of your body mind vehicle. What are its strengths? What are its weaknesses? What are its challenges? The celebration of squares is not something bad, actually. I redefine a lot of the ways people get binary with astrology. You don't grow without squares. Squares are your growing points. And if you're here to grow as a soul, as a being, then those places where it's a little more challenging to see things straight, or things catch up on you from behind, well, we'll go there. And it's mostly a playful experience. I people have loved the readings, and it's amazing where they go, because I had to stop reading people for 26 years. It just dropped out, and just read the world. But when it came back, and I never expected it would, but when it did come back, I discovered that uh, I lost the reader. Now it's just the reading. And you'll notice it if you do readings with people. There's this tension. It's like I'm the doctor in the doctor's office rather than, well, I'm a human being just like you, and I have talents about healing and health and all that. But I'm not going to play prima donna with you, and you're not going, and not expect you to just slavishly wag your tail and say, "Oh yes, doctor, I'll do that," because my kind of doctor is that I respect your sovereignty as a human being to let me spell out your choices, and respect your freedom to decide what your choice that you resonate with and what not. And that goes the same with medicine or anything else. It's like I often see that people in the medical world seem to forget that they're not talking to a piece of meat. They're not talking to a unit for profit of the sickness industrial complex. If they're healers in their field, they're respectful of giving advice and let the person choose. They'll not be like a doctor who says, "Oh, If you're not going to follow my advice, I don't want you coming to my office anymore. That's tyranny. You know, you are, whether you make your mistakes or not, you are the captain of your soul. And my readings are not going to try to change you. They're just going to offer you things to look at. And then in your freedom, you decide whether you have a yes or no with those things. And these readings are really special. Time stands still when these readings happen. And it's mysterious. And so hopefully, well, if you have a yes, uh, check out a reading with me and see what happens. And Paul has done it, so he's borne witness to what I'm saying to you today.
Yeah, I highly recommend it. You know, I think you can learn a lot about yourself, and it's a fun experience. But also just make sure the ones that are listening, please make sure you click the link and also sign up for the periodical. You do it. You release periodicals weekly, bi-monthly. What's the
Um,
release rate?
Release rate right now, given there's so much happening, is that I take it once a month. Sometimes it's usually around the end of the month. And and especially the next 2 months are like every 4 years. This is like the most work that happens because there's so much happening in elections and stuff. So I will be releasing something later in September, and then before Halloween, I'll release my final word on my predictions about who's going to win or what are the chances of either side, etc. So it definitely is logged in, date tagged before the elections. So whether it's succeeds or not. I mean, I learned this from studying Edgar Casey. He made sure all of his trance readings were dated, filed, witnessed, and we get to know because of that how accurate he was. And I now have the proof before me that on average I'm about 80% or above in what I predict. So, and you wouldn't know that if you didn't actually test it by objectively recording everything you've said and write it down and see what then happened.
Great, great. So please, everyone, click the link. The link is in the description of this video and all the videos that I have done with John. So, John, thank you for being on the channel, and sharing your perspective of current events. So, before we go, you have to say goodbye to everybody.
Goodbye, everybody.
All right, let me stop the recording here.